right now, in the health sector, what are the opportunities that you see, given all the economic situation that we have in Nigeria? What kind of opportunities are there, both directly in the health sector and then tech for health? And then how can entrepreneurs get into those opportunities?
That's a really interesting question because I feel that it relates directly to our presentation. Whenever you open the newspapers in Nigeria, you find out that we are obsessed with Nigeria 1. These 2 million people are the people that everybody wants to serve, everybody wants to innovate for, everybody wants to talk about, and it's so small in the grand scheme of things. So in healthcare, every business model that I see is saying, oh, you know, this is how much we lose to medical tourism. If these people can just stay in the country, we'll need to build one hospital, we need to do this huge expensive thing, we need to do this very sophisticated thing, we need to bring these medical tourists back into the country because they're going out and the country is losing money. You know, I've worked in enough countries to know that rich people always go abroad. In Morocco, they still travel abroad. In Dubai, they still go abroad. In Abu Dhabi, they still go abroad. In India, where Nigerians are going to for healthcare, the rich Indians, they still go to Singapore. The rich people, the richest elite, want to be treated by the best doctors in the world. I had access to healthcare in England, but when I had a medical problem, I went to go and research the best doctor in the world. And my mom was asking me that, why don't you take the free one here? I said, I don't want free healthcare. I want good healthcare. So I think that innovating for scale in healthcare involves finding solutions to the problems of those 170 people and trying to find healthcare solutions that are affordable, accessible, and acceptable to those 170 million people. And funding, there also needs to be some policy innovation around it, because I don't think people naturally pay for healthcare. They don't like insurance. People don't pay for insurance, and people say, oh, you know, it's working in America. It's not working in America. When I was in California, you know, when you say you're a doctor, everybody starts telling you their medical problems. So I accidentally said I was a doctor in an Uber, and then the story started. He had a knee operation, this one. But I found out something very interesting. My Uber driver didn't have his surgery in America. And I asked him where he had his surgery, and he said he had it on the border of Mexico. So I said, you left California, where there's Stanford Hospital. You didn't even think of going to Cleveland Clinic that is so famous, or Mayo Clinic, or all these good hospitals. Atlanta is there. You left to go to the border of Mexico at risk of kidnapping and death to go and do your surgery. Why? And he said because he doesn't earn enough to pay insurance. Insurance is expensive. So a lot of people don't have insurance, and when they're uninsured, they have to pay up front, and they prefer to go to Mexico or any of these islands around America for treatment. Now, America invests $10,000 per person in healthcare, and they're not serving everybody. However, Norway invests just $7,000 per person in healthcare, and they're able to serve everybody. The UK invests $4,000 per person in healthcare, and they're also able to serve the entire population. Nigeria, however, invests $6 per person in healthcare. It's going to be a bit difficult to serve the whole population. But there are ways and means where funding, special taxes or levies, to be able to at least put together a basic package of care for people. And when there is demand, then I think there will be more innovations to create supply. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Members of the audience, I'm sure you would have a lot of questions. So you can write down your questions and pass to the ushers, who would give to me, then I'll collate and then ask the audience. If you have ask the panelists. If you have a specific panelist that you want to direct your question to, kindly state it on the paper. Thank you. Mr. Ayo Olajiga, you're in agribusiness and you've been in it for a while. I know you're doing cashew, which is food, but there's a lot along that value chain, the agri value chain. Where do you see opportunities in that value chain? That's the agribusiness value chain, not just the cashew. And how can entrepreneurs tap into those opportunities?
Okay, now Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. I mean, first of all, just to disabuse your mind, yes, we're in food, we're in cashews, but it's not the kind of food that she was referencing that, 60% of the people who spend their budget on. Because we've looked at those numbers, and it's very clear to us that, listen, someone who's spending 60 to 80% of their income on food is not interested in cashews. And we get a lot of competition from groundnuts. Mm-hmm. Even then, those who are spending 60 to 80% are not that much interested in groundnuts because, it's still a luxury product. But when you think about the agribusiness value chain, what I try to tell the people is that you need to be careful because there's a lot of, in Nigeria, there's always this, you pick up a paper, and, I've got friends who called me that, I heard cashew sector is $300 million value, and you've been making all this money, you haven't been sharing it. But the reality is that, first of all, is data is a massive problem. So you always have to be careful when you pick up something in the newspaper that says it's an opportunity. In fact, when they say it's an opportunity in the newspaper, I would suggest you run in the other direction. The way to think about, at least the way we think about the value chain is, first of all, there is primary production. There is what we call the semi-processing, which is take it to not yet finished. Then you're looking at if you want to go one step further to create branded products. And the way I would look at it is, if you take production, pick any crop, there are opportunities. However, it's not as clear-cut as people think it is. My suggestion would be, if you look at production, you have to figure out, look, what problem am I trying to solve? Because if you're not trying to solve a problem, and you're just going there because it said that, cashew is $300 million, I can almost guarantee you now that you're probably going to lose money. Or if you don't lose money, you're probably one of those people who are very lucky. 2018, for instance, I think almost, including ourselves, almost everyone that was in the cashew business lost a lot of money. What happened? There was FX crisis in 2016. People couldn't get access to dollars. So all the big companies realized that if you export raw commodities, actually you can get dollars, because if I ship raw commodities to another country, you get dollars. So suddenly we found ourselves competing with big companies like Nestle and the like, not because they care about cashew, but because they needed FX. So what they do, they don't care about the price. They just want the FX. So something that we used to buy at $500, we suddenly woke up and it was $1,800. And then there's this thing where rather than say, okay, you know what, this thing is too expensive, we can't do it, we then all convinced ourselves that somehow, we're going to squeeze out that jump from 500 to 1,800 by being innovative, by selling branded products. To cut the long story short, he all ended in tears because people lost money. So the first thing is that sector. What problem am I solving? And look, I don't want you to get depressed by the numbers are smaller. Think about it, especially in agribusiness. Think about it. The entire world is your market when it comes to agribusiness, because one example, for instance, one of our biggest clients is sitting in California, right? So we have access to that, $3.3 trillion market. But you've got to figure out what do they need, right? There's no point saying I have a customer in California, but I can't deliver to them. Yeah, that's one. The second thing is, if you go into the processing side of things, I've tried, when we started, we said, we want to give Nigerians access to the same thing that the European gets and the American gets. And very quickly we realized that Nigerians don't care. They don't actually want what the European gets or what the Americans get. They want something that is cheap. That's all. And this is, we've tried it now. We've tried different formats. The harsh reality is people want something that is cheap. And forget, it's not just Nigeria 1 or Nigeria 2. I've forgotten what the nomenclature is. I have a friend who is working in the IFC who told me, this your cashew is expensive. And I looked at him like, you don't even pay tax, right? He doesn't pay tax in dollars, and he's complaining about the cashew is expensive, right? And it's not because the cashew is expensive. It's because it's the mindset around here for now is that anything that is above a certain price is expensive. And you've got to understand that. So if, again, you're trying to do something in processing The question is for who? Because one of the things we didn't have, for instance, if you say I need a trailer from Ilorin to Lagos, you make 5 phone calls, you get 5 different prices. If you're not trying to solve any problem, then leave it alone. There's no, nobody needs it,
Right? Okay. So for somebody like me, I'm into production, and I require heavy energy input into my products. For almost the whole of this year, we've been on generator, because NEPA, PHCN, or whatever the name is, they don't rise up to the occasion. And then I've considered, other options. We have sun everywhere. But then how can there be like an innovative solution such that, because based on what I read about solar is that I would need a large footprint to be able to give myself maybe 200 kilowatts of electricity, per hour or something like that. What kind of innovation can we expect in that space that would make solar or other renewable energy cheaper to be for entrepreneurs or businesses?
Right, okay, so power is the foundational problem for any sector in Nigeria, and it's what makes health difficult, it's what makes agriculture difficult, it's what makes any business you operate in Nigeria difficult. So my company invests in not renewable companies, but off-grid energy companies, most of which are renewable, but some can be gas. And so we're investing in these companies so that they can scale up and provide solutions to more and more Nigerians. One of the companies actually has a booth here. It's called Arnergy, and they are providing solutions for exactly the problem you're talking about to small businesses in Nigeria. So they have a 5 kilowatt system, which is integrated with the solar, the battery, the inverter, everything is there. And you can either outright buy the system, which then is a capital expense that many businesses can't afford.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I have a question here. As an agribusiness enthusiast, trying to break into the agricultural sector, that is vegetable farming aspect, with little or let's say no hand, what advice do you have for this person? Just starting alone, what advice do you have for such a person?
Okay, there's that African proverb. If you want to go fast, you go alone, right? If you want to go far, you go together, or something like that.
Yes.
Look, I'm not trying to discourage. I don't know the context of the question, but my experience so far is that it helps to try to do things in partnership, in terms of just because when you what do you call it, reduce the financial burden on yourself, the emotional stress, because operating in our country at the moment is challenging, and that's the truth. The deputy governor was talking about the increase in VAT, right? The taxes that we pay in Nigeria is not the official ones that are the problem, okay? It's all the other ones that are not recorded anywhere. So when they calculate revenue to GDP, somebody would, because, for instance, I'll give you an example. If the media just promised not to put it anywhere, is I think Sun came to our factory, I think last week or the week before, and they took away, for samples, products worth about 300,000 naira. Now, we do tests all over the world, and even 1 kg is too much for test. So what you're using 300,000 naira for, we don't know. But then it was done under the threat of, if you don't release it under this act, we'll shut down the factory. That's a tax, right? Now, how does that relate to your question of going it by yourself? Is imagine if it's just you that is going through that emotional stress. It's not healthy for you, right? And from a financial perspective, it's just always better to try to hedge your risk and all of that stuff. But more importantly, look, if you insist on going by yourself, I think yes, one of the deceptive things about Nigeria is people tell you we need a lot of this, but they don't tell you where, right? So we have people, for instance, our friends, for instance, who are growing certain products, but then they're being told that, there's oversupply of that product, right? Simply because nobody bothered to do the research to figure out whether, look, tomatoes, for instance,
somebody of take.
in Lagos? Is it in oversupply or undersupply? And when we say oversupply or undersupply, you have to think about it in two ways. You have to think about it in terms of quantity. I have to also think about it in terms of, price/quality, right? Because, yes, your tomato is the best. It has the best nutrients and blah, 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 blah. You want to collect 5,000 naira per basket for it. Whereas the one they sell in K2 is like 800 naira per basket. Now you might find out that your 5,000 naira per basket, which the customers for it, let's assume is in Victoria Island, for argument's sake, right? Maybe they have more than enough, right? And maybe, because I remember there was a time, I don't know if they still do it, there was a supermarket that used to bring in vegetables from Europe. And like the doctor was saying, those guys who want that vegetable from Europe, I don't care what kind of quality your tomatoes that you grew in your fantastic farm in Ekwe is. They just don't want it.
Exactly.
Right? Because it's not come from a farm out of, somewhere in France or wherever it is. And that's something you just need to understand so that you don't, go and spend all this money and then find out that you are playing in the wrong space.
Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Ola Brown, I have quite a number of questions for you, but I'll just summarize every one of them. So somebody said the market sheet targeting is the 2 million people. But what advice do you have for her on how to go about getting in their faces to be able to get them to buy the products from her? Another said there's a doctor who has a hospital in a low-income area, but the person is getting frustrated. What advice would you give for the person to be able to innovate and then still be able to serve that target market? So it's about all target marketing questions. And then another person asked about what other research do you think can be done on the future of application of technology in Nigeria that can make serious impact on the country? You have 2 minutes.
No pressure. Okay, so they're all about this market. So for the market of 2 million people, it depends on whether you're B2C or B2B. So I think all of us on the panel are some way B2B, which means that thing that I showed you is irrelevant. But I talked about B2C businesses, which is business to consumer businesses, because I find that that's what most young people want to start. They want to, when I speak to young people in business, they say, 10 of my friends are wearing Brazilian hair. Let me start selling Brazilian hair. It's a B2C business. Or, wow, jewelries are really moving. I went to a wedding and there are plenty of people wearing this kind of jewelry, so let me start wearing jewelry. Or people are buying cars, like most guys, for instance. So they do B2C businesses, and that's why I spoke about B2C businesses. But actually, all of us on the panel, I think most of our business is B2B, so we sell to businesses, which is completely different. But if you're in a B2C space, so you're selling to consumers, and you're doing this 2 million, then it's going to be difficult because you need to build a strong network. And getting in people's faces, if I wrote a blog post, like how to survive, I think it's called How to Survive in Nigeria If Your Father Is Not Femi Otedola, and it says like 5 things that you can do to sort of build your networks and be able to reach this Nigeria one client. But I would say that it's useful if you've worked in an institution before because you have an automatic network. It's useful to use social media as well if you can't reach them to advertise your product and be very aggressive in terms of marketing. And then really build your network through going to events and shaking hands with people and hone your sales pitch as well. Like I feel like sometimes Nigerian entrepreneurs, especially in the startup world, we over-rely on marketing and under-rely on sales. So we want to just sit at home and maybe be tweeting and be on Instagram, and we're a bit shy about going out and having to meet people and building reciprocal relationships. And these relationships they're long-term relationships where you have to really understand what makes a person tick over a period of time and also invest in the person before they invest in you. So that's number one. Number two, the hospital. service quality is important, customer service is important, so that's a key differentiator in the healthcare space. I hate going to hospital in Nigeria. I hate going to hospital full stop, but I definitely hate going to hospital in Nigeria because like I just feel like you have to wait around for a long time, things are not done in an efficient way. So if there's any way that you can improve on the customer service and make it more like the service that you get in a hotel, then I think that you'd find that you can innovate around that. And also price is very key as well. So keeping your prices low, but keeping the service high, which is easier said than done, but that's the only advice that I have for that. In terms of further research, I think that in Nigeria, some of the problems around case studies of successful businesses that have scaled in Nigeria, we don't have very many Nigerian case studies. And because of that, we start saying what Jeff Bezos did and what Bill Gates did and what Richard Branson did. And these are the people that, the stories that we look up to and the skill sets that we think are going to make us successful in this environment. And I think that it would be better to look at what Dangote did and what Samad did and what Fola Adiola did, because they did very different things to the guys in America.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Wiebe, this last question is for you. I'll still refer to myself once more. So because I make pap, I use corn and all of that. And then, we have the effluents and all of that. So I was doing a lot of research to find out, okay, how can I have gas to be able to power my generator from that? I talked to a lot of people, but I didn't really get anybody to, provide a solution for me. So my question to you is, apart from these that I've just talked about, what other opportunities exist in the renewable energy space? And then how can entrepreneurs in that space stand out? Then another question came. The person is looking to know how they can partner with you. So I'm sure they will walk up to you after the event.
Okay, so to specifically answer your question about, so almost any agricultural waste can be used to generate electricity. It's just a matter of whether you have a sufficient reliable feedstock and how much energy you need to generate. So there is actually a mini-grid company in India called Husk Power, which is called Husk because it was initially powered via rice husks and then corn husks. And their model is you can essentially use any agricultural waste. It can be cassava, it can be probably even cashew, who knows. The problem is they've actually found that solar is still actually cheaper. And so they're actually moving more and more towards solar, but they still use the agricultural waste to generate power when necessary. But look, in the Nigerian market, I mean, you can use almost any waste to generate power, but that is very expensive, especially when the waste in Nigeria isn't, there isn't really a proper waste management system to bring you the waste at an affordable price. In most countries where you use waste to power, they actually pay the generation company to take the waste rather than for them to buy the waste. So that's why it's not economical here. But there's also potential for hydro at small scale. There's hydro technologies where you can basically put a small hydro turbine in a drainage ditch and generate power for your house. There's wind technology now that you can put a small windmill on your house. You can put a kite on your house that generates power from the winds 200 meters up. So there's all of these technologies that are emerging and available, but in the Nigerian market, because of the complexity of some of those other technologies and the difficulty of maintaining them, they haven't really taken off. And so in the end, solar is the one in terms of renewable energies that is really taking off, because once it's installed properly and you have the right batteries and the right inverters and the right, everything set up right, the maintenance is quite minimal. It's basically you have to wipe dust off the panels 2 or 3 times a year. And so that just ultimately makes it easier to use and to understand how to use it and roll it out. And then with the kind of tech innovations in payments that I've talked about earlier, it's now becoming more and more affordable.
Dr. Olajiga, I have a question here. Okay, so by relating with people who are in the agribusiness sector, I realize that prices of commodities actually are high because of the post-harvest losses, and then also transportation challenges and all of that. What aspects of the value chain do you see as being very critical to solving the numerous issues that we experience in the agribusiness sector? Or is there any singular one, or
Okay. So just to clarify, I'm not a doctor, but
You're not a what?
I'm not a doctor, or neither medical or academic. So, but I think by the time I answer this question, I should probably become a doctor. I think for me, when I look at the numerous issues in Nigeria, it comes down to two things. It comes down to two things.
Okay.
The first one is the policy environment, and then the second one is just education. It's not really about whether it's transport or farm gate losses or all of this stuff. Because what often happens is people don't spend enough time to say, okay, look, I'm going to grow tomatoes, right? The guys who are going to consume the tomatoes are next door. So, frankly speaking, all I need to know is how much tomatoes are they going to consume on a daily basis, blah, 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 and I'll produce and I give it to them. But then the moment the people who are going to, consume your tomatoes are 1,000 miles away and all of that stuff, there's thought that needs to be given to how does it get to them, right? And if you can't figure out how to do it, maybe you shouldn't grow the tomatoes. Not grow the tomatoes and then we start complaining about losses, right? Because it's weird. Because I see these trucks coming from the north. I hear they've reduced them now. Where you see those tomatoes in baskets, and then you see people sitting on them. And then someone says, oh, the one they saw in K2 is squashed. I said, well, it doesn't take rocket science to know it's squashed. I mean, even if you drive on the express, you saw the guy sitting on it. I mean, unless you have iron tomatoes, the thing would be crushed. So I find that there's a lot around just, what does the policy environment say? Because we have very strange things that happen. Like, for instance, when people were told to go and grow loads and loads of cassava, then nobody told them that, as soon as you harvest it, it has to get to one place before a certain number of hours, otherwise the this. So you had all these people grow cassava, and then they all woke up and the factories were saying, I don't want this cassava, I don't want that cassava. Because again, no one bothered to say, okay, look, what is required and how should you do it? So there's a lot around that policy environment, and then the second part is just education. And that's why I said, look, whatever you're trying to do, it has to be about trying to solve a problem for somebody, right? Maybe it's the consumer, maybe it's businesses like ourselves. You have to be trying to solve a problem. If all you're trying to do is they say, agribusiness is interesting, I'm going to grow this, I'm going to grow that, unless you're lucky, you're probably going to lose a lot of money. Because, I'm not trying to discourage people from agribusiness. I mean, agribusiness is fantastic. There's a lot of opportunities there. But then there's also a lot of misconceptions about what is possible and what's not possible. For instance, we've known now for a long time that, because we do mostly rain-fed agriculture, it means that we are always going to experience price swings. It's just by definition, because this is the season for this, and then when it's out of season, it's going to have to be expensive. And there are guys who have built their business around that. During the season, they buy the produce, put it in their warehouse, waiting for off-season so that the price must go up. So there are a lot of things that are happening that is simply just about the policy environment and education. And rather, but we keep blaming transport, because I tell people, they say, is power your biggest problem? I say, well, it's a pain, but I can price it. Because I know the price of diesel, I can put it in the price. And then I know once I do all that pricing, then it's not Nigeria one that will buy the product. It's somebody who has significant amount of income, right? And if there are not enough of them, then maybe I shouldn't do it. Or if I'm going to do it, maybe I have a different market I'm sending it to that can afford to do it. So the idea, what I'm saying is, the things that are within our control, we oftentimes can price for it. I'm not saying they should be there. I'm not saying we shouldn't resolve them, but we can price for it. But then there's the other one around, the policy environment and the education, where, some of my, contemporaries woke up and they shut down the border. Suddenly all their raw materials couldn't come in. I mean, I found out a week later in the newspaper that, oh, the border is closed. I'm like, but how do you close the border? And it's like a secret. You know, so it's all these things that you can't plan for. That's where the issues are, not necessarily the other ones. Those ones, they just make the thing expensive.
You can
You know.
budget for them.
Oh,
Thank you
thanks.
so much. Dr. Ola Brown, this question is for you. You said there are 6 things to think about when innovating for scale in Nigeria, in the Nigerian market. What are those 6 things? Can you answer it in 2 minutes?
Yes. So I can't answer the 6 things, but I'll give you an idea of what they are because I can't remember them. They're on the slide. But basically, when you're innovating for scale in Nigeria, I think the first thing, and you know, I'm sure I've impressed it on you enough, but I'll repeat it again, is a deep understanding of the market. And I think that everybody on the panel has kind of resonated with that opinion, that people go into businesses without understanding the markets. I actually went into business and I didn't understand the market. I'd never lived here. I was just sitting in London and I thought, you know what? There are air ambulances all over England. Why don't I come here and just do the same business? And luckily for me, I actually have a much wider market because when you have a plane, you're serving an area from like Central African Republic up until Burkina Faso. So we actually have 11, 12 countries that we serve. So we have a market of several billion people. But it's more difficult when you're doing a localized business. So I would say deep understanding of the market, do your market research. Number 2, I think the importance of using data to make your decisions. So a lot of people make decisions in Nigeria based on prayers, on hope, on anything except hard data. So know your numbers. How many of these people, what is the market size, what are your competitors doing? Make decisions based on data and continue to measure that data as you move through your business. Always be looking at the data, looking at the way the market is changing so you don't get surprised. Number 3 is consider, if you're running an online business, having an offline sort of complement to that business. And a lot of the businesses in Nigeria, I gave the example of Iroko, is a streaming service. Obviously, Netflix does not have an offline component. They've never had to innovate something where you can download offline because they're not facing the same problems as a company like Iroko that wants to grow in Nigeria does. So you can't base your model and say, I'm going to create the Netflix and create a direct copy of Netflix. You have to do something that serves this environment, and that means like thinking creatively around online, offline, or sometimes USSD. So the banking apps that we all use, that's like a Nigeria 1 and Nigeria 2A thing. Anybody down from Nigeria 2A does not have a smartphone. Not even, like they don't have China phone, they don't have Techno phone, they're still using Nokia. So obviously if you look at the banks, they have USSD transfer applications. So it's not just the online apps that they have, they've complemented it. And most of us, even Nigeria 1, we're still using our 737, we're still using the USSD because it's simpler than opening a banking app. So consider USSD as well. And finally, think about user experience with whatever technological app you're innovating around. What's in Nigeria 1 person sometimes understands as good, in Nigeria 2 person might not understand, and in Nigeria 3 person would definitely not understand. So there are different ways of expressing yourself. And some of the products, some of the sort of offerings might have to be translated into local languages, might have to be translated into Pidgin English, or at least hold a focus group. Don't just call, when you're trying to test your product, don't just call your friends that went to Covenant University and Unilag. Call some regular people as well. Call some market women and see what they think about the product. See what their expressions are when they're describing the product, and not just the upper class of market women. Call the really indigenous ones to make sure that your product is applicable for that target market, because you might not understand the target market, but they understand their pain points. And I think you said, make sure it's solving a problem.
Yeah.
So the key thing, and I'll bring it back to the beginning of my presentation, when I said startup companies do not fail for lack of funding, they don't fail because the partner has shafted and ran away with the money. They don't fail because of all the reasons that they think they fail. the number one reasons why startup fail is because nobody wants the product. So make sure, I think that's your anthem now, make sure you're solving a problem.
No problem. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all the panelists and all the members of the audience that sent in questions. I'd like to just summarize what we've discussed so far. And I think the bedrock of everything is for you to innovate, you have to ensure that you're solving a problem. And then it's not just about you're bringing in a wow product or anything. Okay, you want to add something?
I kept on saying make sure you're solving a problem. But sometimes, and I've seen this time and time again, there's a gap in the market, there's an obvious thing that is not being done. But sometimes there's no market in the gap. So you've got to also realize that as well. That sometimes there's a gap that like is really, really gaping and nobody is doing it and it looks like an opportunity. But the reason why nobody is doing it is because there's no market or money there. So make sure you are solving a problem that people will pay for and that you can profit from, not just solving a problem.
Okay. Thank you so much for that summary and addition. So then Dr. Boer also talked about innovation in the renewable energy sector. And then I was quite blown away about the pay-as-you-go option that is now available. Because when you look at installing a solar system in your house, the price is quite enormous. But if you now have something whereby you can pay on a monthly basis or daily basis, it actually makes it very interesting. And then I'm sure maybe a step further would be looking at people paying by deducting from their credit on their phone lines and things like that, which will even make it more interesting. And then you also talked about mini hydro grid, mini wind mills and all of that. So those are places where people can actually, look into to play. I mean in the renewable energy sector, because we know, based on where we are now for the grid electricity that we have in Nigeria, it's not something that can be solved in 1 year or 2 years. So if we have all of those options coming in, it will actually reduce the need and the pressure on the grid system. And then I also took away, know your numbers. It's quite very important because sometimes you just see cash flowing in and going out. You don't know you're not making profit. And then people are making decisions about the cash, and then they now find out that, they become bankrupt and things like that. So it's also very, very important. When you're thinking about innovation for scale, you sit down, you do the plan, you put all the numbers together. Yes, you're planning, because I remember when I started my business, I was thinking, okay, in the first month, 1 million and 1 people are going to buy my pap. But by the time I got on board, the reality sets in. But I'd done some plan, and then I was able to fall back on it. So having no plan at all is actually a plan for disaster. So it's very, very important that as you are innovating, making changes to our processes, bringing in new products as entrepreneurs, that we, sit down and do the calculations. It may not be accurate, but already having that thought process in place helps you along the way when you hit roadblocks. Then I also heard about market testing, which is quite very, very important. And we shouldn't look at, okay, if I'm going to spend money on testing the market, so I don't want to go there because it's like a drain. That money that you don't want to spend now, if you don't do that testing, and extensive testing at that, you're going to have to spend it in the future because it could, cause a whole lot of troubles for you if you don't. Then I hear about some policy changes and education. What I think in that space is that as entrepreneurs, we need to do more of lobbying in the government space. I really don't know how we can make it happen, but because the people that are there who are making those decisions, a lot of times, even when they were running businesses before they got in there, by the time they get there, they forget that they ever had businesses, and they're just making decisions based on what is happening. So I think that as entrepreneurs, we need to form lobbyist groups and then try to work with people, maybe like in the Senate, in the House of Reps, in the local House of Assemblies, work with the committees who are governing or handling the specific pain points, and then make sure that the policies that they are churning out are favorable to us. Thank you so much for your time, for your attention. Thank you.